how do we really know if we have insulin resistance? How do we find that out?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a lot of the kind of signs I said earlier are like classic. So if you have hypertension, if you have a lot of weight, especially around your belly, if you have skin tags, I think a lot of even medical doctors with absence of testing would consider that enough to give a diagnosis. But obviously testing is ideal. Now, the medical community doesn't actually agree on this because, as I said, this insulin resistance, even though I'm saying it's kind of like well known, it's only really well known in our kind of community. It's not mainstream well known how important this insulin resistance is for all these, as a root cause factor for all these different chronic diseases. So, testing blood sugar is one thing, but testing insulin is another one. And you really have to do both for insulin resistance. Testing blood sugar is super easy, as we talked about. Testing insulin is not. So if you really want to test, the best thing I've come across is called a HOMA-IR test, HOMA-IR. And so what that basically is a little equation, a little formula to give you a calculation for insulin resistance. So let me explain. What you would do is first thing in the morning, you, after, not eating, preferably just before you go to bed, so you've been fasting for a little bit, at least, take a blood test, which is simple to do. You can use the kits, which are easily available, as I said, from any pharmacy, from Amazon or whatever, which are sold for diabetics to use. So that's pretty simple. You do a little pinprick thing, and then you put a little microchip inside a little machine that then talks to you, and it says, put in the blood sample, and then you just do a little drop of your blood, you put it on this microchip thing, and it like counts down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it says, this is your reading. So that's simple. Maybe I made it sound too difficult, but it's easy. You can do, you can watch a YouTube video about exactly how to do it, follow along. And as I said, very cheap. Now, the insulin test is none of those things. Maybe the company you usually use doesn't provide it, or the provider, the healthcare practitioner you use doesn't offer it, so you may have to look for it, but it's certainly available, in most places. You just have to look for it. So you want to do that, and this is the crucial thing, you want to do that insulin test at the same time as you test your blood sugar. The blood sugar results you'll get in 10 seconds. The insulin results you might not get for a week, but you've got to remember the blood sugar ones, so write them down, and then get your insulin results. So you write both of those down. So I'll give you an example, like when I did mine. So when I did mine, my blood sugar was about 6 on my scale, which is the rest of the world scale. In yours, it would be 108. I've got a little card in front of me here that translates them. So rest of the world reading, my blood sugar was 6. Your US reading, Christy, it was 108. Then I got my insulin test results back eventually. My insulin test results just said less than 2. So I'm going to count that as 2. Basically, it's such a small unit of measurement that they couldn't refine it any more than that. I talked about how difficult insulin is to test. So then there's a formula that you apply to it. So the rest of the world formula would be 6, in my case, that was my sugar score, times 2, that was my insulin score, so that's 12, and then divided by 22.5. So it's insulin times glucose. So 6 times 2 is 12, divided by 22.5, that was about 0.6, something like that. You want your score to be less than 1. So that told me I do not have insulin resistance. Now, if I was American and I had exactly the same readings, I would have insulin 2, that's the same throughout the world. And then my glucose score by an American chart is 110. So then it would be 2 times 110, which would be 220, divided by 4 or 5. So it's about the same. So you see, like, the equations will both end up the same. It's just you have to use a different divided by depending on what your blood sugar reading is. So that's how you do it. So that's your HOMA-IR score. You want it to be below 1. From what I've seen, that is the best test for insulin resistance. What is it telling us? How does it work? It's basically saying, look, if your insulin is not that high and your blood sugar is not that high, you don't have insulin resistance. It's as simple as that. If your insulin is high, or if your glucose is really high, it's a good sign of insulin resistance. Now, so that's the standard test. What I would say, though, is if your insulin is like, say, 2, and it was your blood glucose that is, let's say double what I said, so like 15 or something, then that does indicate more type 2 diabetes. That's what I would say. So this is my refinement to this standard test, which doctors teach. Whereas if it's the other way around, if it's your insulin that's high, but it's your glucose that's not crazy high, then to me that indicates more insulin resistance. So insulin really is the key factor, but glucose also matters. I guess that would be my summation of that. I did the test again like a while later, and it was like 2.4, something like that. So still, that would give a result where, well lower than 1. I also wanted to try it because the test result was so low. I was like, well, maybe I have type 2 diabetes, right? Because technically that could just be that you have such low insulin that your pancreas isn't producing it. So I did another test when I just eaten, and the insulin was like, can't remember, 12, 20, something like that. So obviously my body is capable of producing insulin. It just wasn't doing it when there was no food around, when I was fasting. This is correct. This is what you want. You want when you eat a food of carbs, that you have plenty of insulin, and then later there is no insulin left or very little. That's what you want. That's what those kind of test results would show you. If your insulin is low fasting and after a meal, that's more classic real diabetes. If your insulin is high fasting and after a meal, that's more classic insulin resistance. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Rejuvenate podcast. If you want to watch the full episode that came from, just click on the link above. Or if you just want to watch our latest video, then click the link below. And make sure that you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thank you.